Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products as we move forward in the 21st century. And also, too, we're looking at the various indigenous peoples all over the planet. As you know, there's 566 federally recognized tribes in the United States and about 150 plus or minus non-recognized tribes and nations within the United States. And then, of course, there's just countless thousands around the planet. And so we're looking at all those peoples and this ancient wisdom, the techniques, the technologies that they were using thousands of years ago before the modern space age, and yet at the same time have many ideas and also techniques that can be used in modern society. And I have someone sitting right beside me, a very special guest, Rebecca Adamson. She is the founder and president of what's called First Peoples Worldwide. That's headquartered in the state of Virginia. And Rebecca, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Sam.
Well, we're glad to have you. And as you know, actually, we've been focusing on Native American nations over these last 12 months. And so you're really coming in at the very appropriate time to talk about what's going on here, but also you have a focus around the globe as Emerald Planet does. So we really appreciate you being here and sharing. But tell us, what is First Peoples Worldwide and how do you reach out and engage so that indigenous peoples, regardless of where they're located, become part of the solutions for where we're going in the 21st century?
That's a great question on the engagement, because we got engaged with you because part of what we really have to do is get our voice out. And so first I want to thank you for this forum to get the indigenous voice out. First Peoples is an indigenous controlled organization. We work globally. It's a long story in how we started. I was working domestically in the United States with an organization I founded called First Nations Development Institute. Mm-hmm. And it really looked at, we did the first microloan fund in the United States.
Oh, that's incredible.
The first credit union, worked to get deposits linked to the first tribal bank. And we were getting letters from all over the world asking us to come help in these indigenous communities because we tied culture and development together. And no one was working with indigenous people saying, your culture is the strength. Mm-hmm. It's building on our culture is how we develop. So we got these letters, and coming from the United States, I really literally didn't know if they were even countries. So I got a globe, you know, I had it on my desk, and I'd look, I'd get a new letter.
Well, I tell you, one thing about all this, Rebecca, though, is, you know, looking at the indigenous cultures, but it's the wisdom that resides there. And when you go in, you spend time. I traveled across virtually all of Papua New Guinea, which at that time was literally still almost a Stone Age population. But the wisdom that these people had that they could talk about that went back, you know, in the dawn of time is just incredible. And you're doing that with these various indigenous nations within the United States.
Well, we're doing it globally, and the wisdom and the brilliance is in our communities. We make grants all around the world, and we really reach grassroots traditional communities. 1/3 of our grantees have never had a dollar or a fund, any kind of funding before. No money whatsoever.
So everything was within the community itself.
And very, very traditional communities. And we're finding traditional knowledge, empirical data of 40, 50,000 years. People know where the bird builds its nest, tells them how much floods to expect that year. It's a biomimicry kind of science that we have in our traditional knowledge. Mm-hmm. We've seen floods and mudslides predicted from the way the animals behave, and we make grants to communities that know this, so that we don't have the satellite laptops, but we have biomimicry that we share among our grantees so that we can really know when a natural disaster is coming.
Well, I'll put this slide up here, which you shared with us, and this is really a very powerful message. And so I'm just going to be quiet, and why don't you tell us about what we're looking at here and the importance of this to the whole Earth. All 7+ billion of us.
My gosh, this should be on billboards everywhere at this point. Indigenous people have our own territory. territories. If you were to add the territories up, it consists of between 18 to 23% of the Earth's land surface. So we took in the middle and said 20% of the Earth's land surface is indigenous lands. 80% of the remaining biodiversity is on our land, Sam.
You need to repeat that.
20% of the land is indigenous. 80% of the planet's biodiversity is on indigenous lands.
And then the gray screen that we see in this is the opposite of that, right?
Yeah, the gray screen is non-indigenous land, 80% with 20% of the biodiversity. We have to become guardians and stewards of the life on this planet. And we have empirical data in our traditional ecological knowledge that belongs to all of us, that really has come over empirical collections of years and years that we want to share. But we also want credit for it, and we want that recognition.
And you need to be part of the activities going on in the United Nations through the Indigenous Peoples Congress and Forum and all these other things that actually we've been involved in for many years is very important. But this really tells a very powerful story as well. So let's talk about this.
Well, I'm an Indigenous economist, and so we make our grants very directly to our communities, like I said. And one of the things we're most interested in is an Indigenous economic system. And when you look at this, what we wanted to look at was how resources are distributed. Stand up. How resources are distributed in an economy, a traditional indigenous economy. On the one hand, which it would be on the left-hand side of the screen, is how a whale gets distributed and where whale meat gets given after a hunt.
And when you're saying that, this is a single whale that's is all about, you know, one village or one tribe, and then it goes across this huge, vast area. Is that correct? Is that
Absolutely.
what we're seeing?
This is a single village. It's an Inupiat village up in Alaska, and a single whale hunt. And those are all of the places a piece of whale meat or a piece of the whale harvest is shared. The next map, same Inuit village, and it's cash. And it's how cash comes into one of our villages and how cash is distributed, and which one generates the most wealth. And we were really seriously looking as an Indigenous economist at the value that this could bring into today's kind of economic thinking.
This is really a powerful story, and something we just don't think about, this distribution as far as the currency is concerned versus the things that actually come out of the community itself, whether it's a whale or a bear or, you know, salmon, whatever it may be, is very, very important to these indigenous peoples. Well, look at your background. Tell us a little more about that. You have an economics background, so tell us something about that. And then how have you leveraged that over these years as far as dealing with the indigenous peoples here and other countries around the globe?
Well, I think because I am an economist, and I really shy away and say I actually am an indigenous economist.
Okay.
And I think some of the things we've done, like in the United States, we have a little more financial resources. So we created the first microloan fund in the United States on the Pine Ridge Reservation, the Lakota Fund in South Dakota. As we worked internationally, the primary asset internationally is going to be natural resources with many of the indigenous peoples. And what we're looking at is an economy that values the forest and going into or juxtaposed to an economy that the only value that forest has is in board feet. And so we're really trying, and this is why I think all over the world people started writing us in crayon, on paper, asking us to come to their village and work with them because it's culture and development. And we begin looking through our grantees at very successful approaches where this is brought into the modern economy, Sam. And that's where we're, First Peoples Worldwide is really looking at that nexus where traditional values, traditional understandings, and traditional knowledge moves us in an economic direction in a new way.
Well, Emerald Planet's all about this too, the intersect between the environment and the economy. So what is the link between the indigenous peoples and the environment?
Well, I think because it's not a quaint saying when we say you need to design the economy and the social organization in balance and harmony. And when we looked at our economic systems, if you go back to sort of the whale map, and you can see how everybody gets their needs taken care of with a minimal impact on the environment. We've seen, I have a video called Enoughness, if you go to YouTube and look up Enoughness. And it's a practice in indigenous communities where when you have enough, you stop. In the micro-lending, people didn't want to grow their business and franchise. They had enough, and they stopped their business growth at a size. Hunting, when you have enough to eat, they stop the hunting. It's a very extensive use of resources that is about balance and harmony with all of life.
Mm-hmm. And so the whole thing really is how do you share the wealth?
Yes.
But at the same time, it's not just sharing the wealth. I think what you're talking about, Rebecca, is how do you protect the wealth so it's organic and it grows for future generations, because the indigenous peoples I've met, and whether it's in China or Taiwan or Thailand, places like that, it's always about the next generations, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, and not just the needs of today.
It's a tremendous insight, and you'll hear different sayings where every decision must consider the seventh generation, but there is a given understanding of looking into the future and organizing economically and socially, and even politically. Nowadays we need to organize politically to get that accountability to the planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll leave the politics to other folks, but we'll talk about the environment and the economy here on Emerald Planet TV. But looking at, and we're just about out of time, so the engagement with major corporations, so CSR, you know, corporate responsibility within these communities, how does that link with what you're doing as far as First Peoples Worldwide and linking those corporations, but having that triad is the third leg of the stool are the indigenous peoples?
It very much is. Our role is we make grants directly to communities, but we also advocate with corporations, and we bring grants, the grantees, investors, and the corporations together, because we have to work this out. We can't remain polarized. Polarity is not going to get us moving forward. It's really about common goals and this incredible wisdom about some new ways to think about the economy and bring corporate players into it. I think every single community wants free prior informed consent, which really is our legal framework to say we have a right. We have a right when something's going to affect us, whether it's a medical free prior informed consent or a community free prior informed consent. We can determine our own destiny. Okay,
we have just absolutely out of time. Looking at this whole thing is, where do you see yourselves going over the next 5, 10, and 15 years? And you have about 20 seconds to do all that.
Well, we're focusing more on the corporate and investor leverage points so that we can really get corporations to the table to listen to indigenous peoples.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is Rebecca Adamson. She is the founder and president of First Peoples Worldwide, looking at indigenous people and all 214 countries and territories around the globe, plus the 566 federal and 150 non-federal, federally recognized tribes in the United States. Rebecca, this is a powerful message. And thank you, dear viewer, for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we're looking around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, products, and of course the people are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we add 2 billion new people to the planet by 2050, how we're going to be able to provide an increasing quality of life and standard of living, maybe even more than what we have today here on planet Earth. And I have someone sitting right beside me that's actually actively working on this on a day-to-day basis. Even though he's a very young man, he has many years of wisdom, so he's going to be sharing with us about where we're going with the indigenous peoples, which are millions around the globe. This is Nick Pelosi. He is the Corporate Engagement Manager of the First Peoples Worldwide. And Nick, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about First Peoples Worldwide organization, but why somebody like yourself, you have a very stellar academic background, good professional experiences. Why would you join with a nonprofit to focus on indigenous peoples here and abroad?
Well, prior to joining First Peoples, I interned with an organization that was developing financing models for solar energy so that it was more affordable, basically using money to advance the environmental agenda. And then I came to First Peoples, which is using similar tactics to advance indigenous rights, although at a much higher level. Basically, we're trying to reform the whole market. I manage our corporate engagement program, which is all about constructive dialogue and engagement with the private sector.
But also local governments, state governments, as well as NGOs, correct?
Right,
I mean, you're going across every sector of society.
Right, and also investors, multilateral banks, industry associations, with the overall goal to promote business models that uphold free, prior, and informed consent, which is the idea that indigenous peoples can say yes or no to development on their lands.
And this is something, Nick, you and I have talked about, and also with the National Congress for American Indians, is that these are sovereign nations, and it's something that some people hear it, most people don't really, hear about this and really know much about it. So what sets aside these sovereign nations within the borders, say, of a country like the United States?
Well, free, prior, and informed consent is enshrined in international law. It's referenced 5 times in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the challenge now is implementing that rights-based framework, and our strategy for doing so is to take it and put it in language that the private sector can understand, which is the language of cost and value and risk.
And what they bring to it. I know that this Indigenous Rights Risk Report is something that you've worked on and many hundreds of others worked on. It's something that's being provided to corporations and again NGOs, local, regional, national governments and all that. And so what is the economic viability that this particular document is talking about as it relates to indigenous peoples?
The Indigenous Rights Risk Report, it was originally produced in response to growing demand from investors for better tools to assess whether companies are building good relations with indigenous peoples. And it's a risk report because it's not just a moral issue, there is business risk to not having good community relations. An example is when the report first came out, there was a company called Southwestern Energy exploring for oil and gas reserves up in New Brunswick, Canada. They did not obtain consent from the local First Nation, who in turn filed a lawsuit and started a protest. Meanwhile, Analysts were calling Southwestern Energy a great long-term investment, a low political risk company. On the other hand, we saw that this company was operating on disputed land with no clear engagement strategy and clear signs of community opposition, and we said it was a high-risk project. And 2 weeks later, it exploded, the protests turned violent, rubber bullets were shot, cop cars were set on fire, the federal police had to be called in.
Well, this is not really a happy scenario. So let's
not
fast forward beyond all of this about how do you set the scenario so that people are actually engaging early on, and then allowing, the economic benefits, but also the cultural, social, and environmental benefits be realized by everyone that's going to be involved in this project.
So the point is that social risk is material. This protest cost Southwestern Energy $60,000 a day. That was the cost of the rental equipment that they couldn't access because people were blocking it. And that figure would be higher if you count the legal fees, staff time, all that. So the point is that social risk is material, and it's a huge blind spot for investors. The Securities and Exchange Commission does not require companies to report on community engagement. So investors have very limited means to assess corporate social performance, despite the connection with financial performance that's getting stronger. So the report intends to fill that gap. We looked at 52 oil, gas, and mining companies. We identified where their projects are on or near indigenous land and rated their risk exposure to violating free, prior, and informed consent. We used a methodology based on more than 21 different indicators. Even though it was originally produced for investors, it's proving to be useful across the board. Companies are using it to identify and mitigate risk that wasn't previously on their radar.
And also, I would assume in all this too, Nick, that this allows local, state, federal governments, depending on whatever this is touching on, to be able to plan.
Sure.
Because this goes into taxation, it goes into land use issues and all these other things,
right,
as well as health and education and other kinds of basic necessary infrastructure.
Yeah.
So looking at all of this, how do we mold this together? Again, I'm going back to my original question. I'm not sure we really answered it. How do we bring everybody to the table so that they all have input in the beginning and they feel like they're a stakeholder in what's going on, and then people can move forward whole and not having disjointed or having these kinds of disagreements or something even worse?
Right. Well, this can be a very polarizing debate, and there is a hunger for solutions on all sides of the table, on the corporate side, indigenous side, government side. The first step to finding those solutions is going to be building common ground. And by framing these issues in terms of risk, it builds that common ground because it's in everybody's interest to mitigate that risk.
Should it be from the standpoint of risk, or should it be from the standpoint of benefit? This is the whole thing, how you attract more bees, is it's honey or vinegar. And so it sounds like we're getting the stick before the carrot. So how do we do this so that people look at it that this is a great benefit for all stakeholders to work together to come to, as you were saying, common ground, common understanding, so you can move forward? It doesn't mean everybody gets everything they want, but at the same time, the fact is that everyone can benefit.
Right, and at every point of risk, there is opportunity to create value. So it really is just a matter of how you're looking at it. And like I said, one of the interesting things about the report is the fact that it is viewed as useful by so many different parties. Indigenous communities see it as a tool to advocate for themselves by making the business case. Governments are really picking up on the fact that there's a direct link between country risk and corporate risk. In other words, projects in countries where that are less likely to uphold indigenous rights are more likely to be high risk to corporations.
I see. Okay.
And so
well,
it's a tool to advocate for better indigenous rights policies by making the economic case for it.
But also, too, then these governments, whether they are more for or against or neutral, and that can look at this. This is in the sovereign nation status of a country, whatever that country may be.
Right.
Is that we really do need to consider these peoples and make them part of the stakeholders and what's going on. So are there any changes that you've been seeing, this emphasis both with the work that you're doing as far as First Peoples Worldwide? The United Nations has a huge focus on indigenous peoples. How is this playing out as we move towards 2050?
Well, I actually think that the idea of free, prior, informed consent, indigenous peoples have the legal framework, but one of the most visible trends I can see is the expansion to all communities, and I think there's a lot to learn from indigenous peoples in that regard. The social license is applicable everywhere. That's industry lingo for community support. It's not something that can be given by governments. Governments can play a role in creating the right environment, but it's ultimately up to communities to give or withhold the social license.
And really, on talking about that, Nick, it's something that needs to be earned. The respect, the communications, the common understanding as far as what is really important within these communities. We're almost running out of time. So looking at this as far as First Peoples Worldwide, where do you see this going as far as, we'll use this term, benefits analysis for all stakeholders? How do you see this playing out, say, over the next 5, 10, 15 years around the globe?
Well, we just finished our first round of back testing, which is where we're comparing our risk scores to the financial performance of companies. And so far, the results do indicate a correlation. On average, companies with lower risk scores are doing better than companies with higher risk scores. The caveat is that our sample size is too small. We have 52 companies. We need at least 100 to be statistically credible in the financial world, but it's a promising first step that really emphasizes the need for more research in this area.
And so this is something you see it's going to be evolving over the next 5, 10, and 15 years.
Absolutely.
And it's an opportunity to bring all these stakeholders and communities together there.
Right. There is a business case for environment as well.
Well, we're going to have to leave it at that. Nick, this is Nick Pelosi, Corporate Engagement Manager, First Peoples Worldwide. Thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged, where teachers have more time to teach, and students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has a drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. on a week-to-week basis as we're looking around the globe to the issues, the people, and the processes that are making a difference as we go to a planet of some 9 billion people across the planet. And we're looking at the people that are actually making a difference and are working with what is many times left out, the indigenous peoples within many countries, the chief among these, like the 566 federally recognized nations on the United States, and then 150 others that are not federally recognized, and then there's just literally thousands of such groups in the 214 countries and territories around the globe. But we have someone who is very much involved in all this, both here and abroad. She's coming in to us by Skype. This is Stephanie A. Conduff. She's an attorney, so Esquire, and she's CEO of Sovereign Concepts, LLC, and a representative for the First Peoples worldwide. And looking at her resume, that's just 2 things out of about 30 other things, Stephanie, that you're very much involved in. Thank you for being with us. And then sitting right beside me is Nick Pelosi, who is the Corporate Engagement Manager for the First Peoples Worldwide. So Stephanie, welcome by Skype, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me today.
Glad to have you out. Tell us a little bit about, you have a Native woman-owned company. This is the Sovereign Concepts. You're doing many other things as well. And also you work with First Peoples Worldwide. What is this Native woman-owned company? How does that work? The importance of it, and then also your own organization, and then we'll get into the, the real essence of what we're here to talk about.
Yes, thank you so much. Sovereign Concepts is a firm that we put together with a group of entirely Native professionals who answer the call when others call us to do special projects. So some may call it a consulting firm, but really we have a lot who seek us out and ask us to do research projects, manage social media contracts, and look into different types of things that need to be done. It may be a tribal leader, it may be an international customer, and it may be someone as incredible as Rebecca Adamson, which in this case is how First Peoples and Sovereign Concepts came together. Yeah, I think it's absolutely wonderful what you're doing, and of course, with the First Peoples Worldwide, she is the founder and president of the organization headquartered in Virginia, and you're out in Oklahoma. And of course, you're in the middle of Indian country out there. Tell us, what does Indian country mean, and why is that such a dynamic force as far as the new economy within the United States, but also it's now reaching around the globe? Well, the attorney in me wants to tell you that Indian country means many things depending on the statute that you want to look to. But Indian country generally means the place that we live, the place that we are, and unified together, it's the space that we live in. And the thing that I appreciate about Indian country and First Peoples is that Rebecca understands, and the law firm that I work with understands, that it's important for me to live in Oklahoma and in the Cherokee Nation. I see right now on the screen is Wilma Mainkiller, who is a mentor of mine, and her daughter Gina is someone that I worked with in my tribal government as well. And Indian country is just a special place. It pre-exists the United States of America, and it's a space that Indigenous people live and will continue to live no matter what geographical boundaries others put on top of us. Now, looking at your work as an attorney, which is very important, and
you're actually credited with 3 of the major Native American nations there in Oklahoma. And the reason I'm saying all this has real power, and it provides you a platform that few people actually have. I had a chance to meet many of the supreme chiefs and others that are managing these tribal areas. And it's amazing the educational background, but just their dedication to do good among their people. But they really do want to leverage both the business and the environment. So as an attorney, how do you mesh all this together and work with these elders? You're much younger, female, and so that has definite impact. So how does all this mesh together so that there's common cause for everyone that lives within these geographical locations called sovereign nations?
Well, I think that's one of the things that Rebecca saw in choosing to work together with Sovereign Concepts and First Peoples, and why she and I work together so well, is that she understands that a lot of those who have come before me in leadership positions saw something and wanted to work together and have invested a significant amount of time in teaching me. And I've learned from all that I observe and continue to learn and grow. And that's why I'm so thankful for her leadership and the years of service and dedication she's had in Indian country and with Indigenous peoples worldwide. So it's a mutual relationship where we grow. Also, having an attorney who's able to look at things from a different perspective. And I was a reporter before I went to law school and have a master's in public policy. And so I'm able to, as a Native woman, look at it from one perspective, and as the attorney mind, look at it from another. And as we work together, for our grantees and for those that we work for in our outreach, we've seen significant returns in our social media outreach. We reach more than 110,000 people each week in our social media through Facebook and through Twitter. And whenever we are working on economic empowerment issues for small businesses, like we did in July, then we see returns for our small businesses, which is revenue. And for people who are rurally located, revenue is economic empowerment. And as a small business owner, that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, very much so. And it needs to go beyond the barter system, which many Indigenous peoples have to live on a day-to-day basis. And you really need to have a cash economy if you're going to have leverage economically, socially, and educationally, and all the other aspects of modern-day society. Even though you're building on wisdom of the past, you still have to have, the levers as far as the finances and government to make things work. But as you know, we have Nick sitting right beside me. He's representing right now Rebecca Adamson, who, as you've been talking about, is the founder and president of First Peoples Worldwide. Nick, why don't you ask the next question, please?
Sure. So a big part of our corporate engagement program is focused on socially responsible investing, and within that universe, a big part of that involves supporting Native-owned businesses and investing in Indigenous community development funds. And so, Stephanie, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how First Peoples is working with Native-owned businesses and supporting economic development in Indian country.
We have an excellent ability for our staff to work in technical assistance. So there's years of experience within the First Peoples staff. So we have those who will see posts on our social media and will contact me and say, is there anyone who can help me with this? And we'll connect them internally. And Rebecca Adamson is generous. And even if we have a dedicated staff who works long and hard and many hours, and she'll say, well, maybe you could just connect them with one more person. And with an international network, she will find that one more person so that they have that support. So I'm ever thankful for her leadership. We also, in the month of July, featured a Native-owned business, one every single day. Everything from Bed Ray Chocolates, which is owned by the Chickasaw Nation, to an Alaskan-owned skincare company who she had seen and wanted to make sure others knew about before the holiday season's upcoming. So we just make sure that we take and focus on those who may not otherwise be focused on. If you're going to the Grand Canyon, we want you to know that there's a Native vendor that you can purchase a rafting, cultural tourism from. And so we really look to see who's doing business and then to give you an Indigenous option. And I think that if you look at our 35,000 and growing followers on Facebook and those that you can find on Twitter and our reach of more than 110,000 people each week, then you'll see that those vendors, we even featured a food truck, and the food truck messaged me after and said, you know, thank you so much. I couldn't even keep food in my food truck, and people are coming the next 3 weeks. And that meant so much for him and his family, and they were going to be able to buy additional back-to-school clothes. So these are tangible experiences that we're hearing from small business owners that you would love for anyone, but especially for Native people, and seeing the direct correlation between the work at First Peoples Worldwide and that in the community. It's exciting to see in social media.
Well, and we're talking about families and the impact, and of course that's the immediate, but really it's impacting the entire community. And when you have people that are bringing more and more financial resources, you know, into the nation itself or within to the local community. And I think that's something, Stephanie, that we don't really look at the multiplier effect, how that money ripples throughout the entire society, and you can buy other goods and services and technologies, and more and more indigenous peoples, they're plugged into the 21st century world using social media, as you were pointing out, but also all the various levers as far as the internet and the World Wide Web, the cloud computing, all these other kinds of things. So looking at that, how does this actually impact in these rural communities where many of the indigenous still live, which we kind of forget about, and how we need to really leverage the internet and you know, even the use of cell phones and other things to bring about more business within those areas?
Well, an exciting thing that happened recently here in Oklahoma, which I can speak from my own experiences, is that President Obama visited the Choctaw Nation. And that was an exciting time. He came here to talk about the broadband expansion. And when I worked for the Cherokee Nation, we worked on a broadband mapping program to make sure that children in rural areas, Native, non-Native alike, have access to broadband, because it's important for their development, for their learning, for economic development, for their families to be able to have businesses like Google that want to come here and have great employees and have access to lower costs of living and, you know, put their businesses here, which we have great incentives to recruit businesses to come here to Oklahoma. So broadband's important. Having access to the internet's important. We work with a company here, Native-owned company, the C3 Group, and they do website design. They also make sure that it looks great on a phone as well as on a computer, because a lot of people have the ability to pay for a smartphone, but maybe not to carry internet in their home as well. They have to make a choice because there's limited resources. So whenever they're developing other websites, like Sovereign Concepts website, they prioritize content that's going to look great on your phone as well.
Stephanie, we've absolutely run out of time.
Sure.
You got about 5 seconds. Where do you see your organization being in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Just working with other great women like Rebecca Adamson, First Peoples Worldwide, and being a continual leader in Indian country.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for being with us. Stephanie A. Conduff, Esquire, CEO, Sovereign Concepts, LLC, representing First Peoples Worldwide. And thank you for being with us as we're looking into these indigenous communities and how they show the way for the future as we create the Emerald Planet.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
Are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we go towards a planet with 9 billion people by 2050. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director for Emerald Planet, and we bring this to you on a week-to-week basis so that you can meet the literally thousands of people in all the 214 different countries and territories that are making a difference as we reach out to determine how we're going to incorporate the indigenous peoples and bring them in with their wisdom and the millennia of experiences and apply that into a space age technological based society. And so it's very important that we do that. And we have a gentleman who's actually doing this, actually two gentlemen with me that are doing this on a day-to-day basis. Coming in by Skype is Mickie Moore. He's advisor for Sovereign Concepts, LLC. And he's here by Skype, and sitting right beside me is Nick Pelosi, who is the Corporate Engagement Manager for the First Peoples Worldwide. And he's here as a backup to Mickie being with us. Mickie, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV. Let's see. Make sure that we have the voice going. Mickie, are you here?
Can you hear me?
There you go. Thank you for being with us and joining us. Please share a little bit about your perspective and the mission and vision of the Sovereign Concepts LLC, and how is that incorporated into the work you're doing with indigenous peoples, and how is that really a platform for the indigenous peoples themselves to express their interests, their needs, and what they can actually bring to the greater society?
Yeah, what we do at Sovereign Concepts is we are basically, we do some consulting, but it's basically small businesses looking for resources. Could be lending, but it also could be professional help. We have a wide variety of talents on our team that we use, from a CPA to legal advice, things like that, even to starting the small business, writing a business plan. These are very small concepts for some people, but difficult tasks for others. And that's what we want to be here to help maybe an indigenous artist take their work to market and to be a thriving business, but they don't yet have those skills, so that we can help them with financial literacy, to writing a business plan, to getting a loan and seeing them grow, incubating that business. That's our goal right now, is to help grow a small business in Indian country with a focus on eastern Oklahoma as we speak right now.
That's fantastic. Tell us a little more about you, your background, and how you became involved working with Native American nations, governments, and Native-owned businesses in Indian country. But let's define this concept. What is Indian country, and how are these sovereign nations? This is something that probably most of our viewers have no idea about.
Yeah. I grew up in eastern Oklahoma, in the heart of Cherokee Nation in Sequoia County, Oklahoma, with my parents both being public educators in the state of Oklahoma's public school systems. And growing up in that environment, helping people was the main thing, you know. And so once I got older, I became involved with my tribe, and I became a member of the tribal council, the youth tribal council there when I was in high school. And they always told me to go get my education and come back and make a difference in my tribe. And so I went to Haskell Indian Nations University and got a bachelor's degree business within. My associates was in entrepreneurship, and so I became fascinated with the different tribes that were represented there on our campus, but also how big Indian country was. And I was like you, I was saying, what is Indian country? Oklahoma is Oklahoma. We got quite a few, 39 tribes in the state of Oklahoma. To me, that's Indian country. But then there's 566 nationwide. And so we start looking at the whole perspective of it. And Indian country is anywhere where the indigenous people live, whether that's in a rural area or urban area. And to me, that's how I define it.
And that's something, Mickie, that most people don't realize, that how many of the various nations and the tribal people actually live in very urban areas. As you probably know, they're saying by 2050, as roughly 80% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. Actually, the United States is already at that number, and it's growing almost on a year-to-year basis. So I think that they have a real impact, and that's why we're talking about this, Mickie, and thank you for sharing. And as you know, we have Nick sitting right beside me. Nick, why don't you ask the next question?
Mickie, can you talk a little bit more, or a little bit about community development and financial institutions and how they're different from most other financial institutions?
Yeah, once I got out of college, Nick, I went ahead and got my MBA, and then I went to work for my tribe. As I said, that was one of my goals, and I came into working into housing loans and working in a CDFI for small business development funding with the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and it was a fascinating thing, and I learned the power of a CDFI and how much of an impact it can have on as far as economic development, not only job creation, but you're increasing tax base, you're impacting so many different things by creating these micro loans to a small business that maybe they just got a contract and they needed that cash flow to get through. And being able to do that, it saved 5-10 jobs, but it goes way beyond that. And ever since then, that's been kind of my focus, is working with these small businesses to through CDFIs, through new market tax credits, through government contracting, to elevate them to different levels so that they can continue to employ our citizens and make great impacts on our communities.
Well, I think that's fantastic, and thank you for that question, Nick, and thank you for answering that. What kind of resources are needed by these traditional Native American communities, and are they similar or different than other at-risk communities, whether they're in rural or urban areas?
I've always developed over the time I've seen it, and poverty's poverty. It doesn't really matter where it's at, and our needs when that poverty are almost always the same. As Stephanie alluded to a while ago, the magnitude of this broadband access to rural Oklahoma is going to be just amazing, because the technology it's going to bring to our kids for education, it's going to impact our future generations of our children here in eastern Oklahoma and our Native communities. And as they said, earlier in the show, that when in any country, we're taught that you look at 7 generations before you with respect for where you are today, but also you look at 7 generations into the future. And that's part of this, is the things that we do today are going to have such major impacts on our future of our children's.
Go ahead. Why don't you ask the next question, if you don't mind, Nick?
Are you building on that point, are you aware of any Native-owned businesses that are integrating environmental sustainability into their operations?
Yeah, not only our small businesses, but our tribe. One thing that we've looked at in the past 10 to 15 years is local, kind of the Buy Indian Act, but also from a tribal standpoint, where tribes support small businesses. And as tribes get contracts with the government and programs, and they move towards a green initiative, they're looking for our small Native American-owned businesses to also support those things, anywhere from recycling to digital documentation, farming for our casinos and stuff like that, growing our own food. All those things are going to contribute to it, and it also takes us back to some of our traditional ways, that maybe we have gotten away from in any country. And those things are bringing us back to to what our natural state is as well.
Well, I think this is something you were mentioning about Stephanie earlier. That's Stephanie Conduff, attorney, CEO for Sovereign Concepts, your colleague there. And one of the things that she's working with, and also with the First Peoples Worldwide, is to look at how do you take these traditional methods and concepts and technologies, but move them into the 21st century. So how are you seeing through your organization, Sovereign Concepts, where you're making this bridge from this traditional wisdom and methodologies into something that's, as we say, the space age, but yet still we need those kinds of ideas and concepts, like the green farming and providing locally based foods and developing the food, the fuel, the fiber need by all of humanity. So how is your organization providing that bridge between these traditional societies and the global society?
I think from our side, we look at financial literacy, and they go through a program, and we use a training method that would have a Native American influence, that shows them how to take maybe a traditional art or a traditional activity and make it into an eco business, or capitalize on the tourism that we've already had within many tribes because of our gaming. Kind of using resources that's already there, that they've been doing for years. Maybe they're a food vendor and they cook traditional meals, helping them to set it up and show them how that it is truly a business in it. They may not have that confidence, they may not have that know-how, and that is how we support them and show them that there is a market there and how to market. As Stephanie alluded to, using social media. Some people don't think about how that impacts it, but when you take someone that doesn't have internet access and doesn't really know about Facebook, and then all of a sudden they do know about it and they know how to use it properly, the impacts on their business could be huge, especially when they're talking about tourism.
Yeah, and they can reach around the globe doing
Absolutely.
that. We've just about out of time. We got about 20 seconds. What do you see for the growth and development of Sovereign Concepts over the next 5, 10, or 15 years?
I see us becoming more and more involved with our Native American communities throughout Indian country, expanding our resources to include hopefully a CDFI funding institution, to being able to host more people in our incubator and reach more people, expand our market target area in the next 5 to 10 years. Those are all things, but at the heart of it, and the heart of what we look at in business, I think is a Native American traditional concept of it's a greater honor for us to give than it is to receive.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. This is Mickie Moore, advisor, Sovereign Concepts, right beside Nick Pelosi, as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, gentlemen.